Hi, everyone, and welcome to this free episode of TF. It is Riley and Alice in studio today.
It's the free one.
It's the free one. There's no hootin' and hollerin' because Hussein and Milo are both at undisclosed locations.
Mm-hmm.
However, to bring the hooting and much of the hollering, yes, almost all of it, really, we are very glad to be joined by Greg and Jordan from Brigham Young Money, all the way over in Utah. Guys, how's it going?
Hello. I'm the meme of the hooting and the hollering at the soda fountain right now.
Yeah, he brings all the hooting and all the hollering. I don't know what I bring to the equation, honestly.
Well, if he's bringing all the hooting and all the hollering, what you are, my friend, is you are the Bez.
What is the Utah Bez?
Oh, from the Happy Mondays?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't expecting a Happy Mondays pull from you, to be honest. That's not the kind of music I associate with you.
I don't know anything about the Happy Mondays as a band. I know them because I like Steve Coogan's films.
But you were aware of Bez from the Happy Mondays. The one who used to be there in order to take drugs and nominally be part of the band.
Yes. Yeah, the guy who's the guy in the Happy Mondays whose job was to be on stage really high, dancing around and not playing any music.
Sure.
So we have the Alex Rider bringing the hootin' and the hollerin', and we have the Bez playing his maracas.
The dream.
I can live with that.
Yeah, I'm glad to just bring you guys a little bit of British culture that I've internalized from being here for so long. But no, I kid. Neither of you are the Bez. You're both the Alex Riders, and we are here to talk.
Just fantastic interpersonal work there.
So we're going to talk all about this a very interesting phenomenon, which is how the Mormon Church and the sort of state of Utah have managed to, as they have been for the last 100 years, be the perfect capitalist subjects and the perfect agents within capitalism to ride every successive wave and adapt to every change they need to create a tech industry in Utah, basically.
That's right, Utahology.
Have they invented a sort of silicon geographic feature for this yet? Because I know there's a Silicon Valley for real, and then in West Virginia they talk about the Silicon Holler and stuff, and it's is there a Silicon Salt Lake, or what do they call it?
They call it Silicon Slopes, which is exactly.
Oh, that sucks so bad.
Just like Britain, we had the Olympics once and we made it our entire identity.
Okay, right, gotcha.
I will also say that my mom was a nurse in Utah County for a lot of years at a hospital that per capita did more boob jobs than anywhere in the world. So Silicon Slopes takes on a double meaning. It's a bit of a double entendre here in Utah.
Yeah.
I want to ask all of you to tell me what you think Valid Phil
Oh no,
is.
we've abruptly moved into the startup segment.
Yeah, that's right.
Valid Phil?
Valid Phil.
Okay.
That's right. I want to start with Greg.
Is that Lisa Ann's new venture?
Yeah. Well, it's actually what's going to happen is that's her new venture, and then she's going to be acqui-hired by Twitter.
Great.
Yeah, and then she's going to be made the CMO. No, I do not believe Lisa Ann is involved with Valid Phil, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Jordan, what do you think? Valid Phil.
Okay, for Valid Phil, I'm going to go with it's an ESG-approved landfill service.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. How would that... So we think it's we've chosen the most deserving place to be a new landfill. We are putting a landfill outside this.
We do a traditional land acknowledgement before we dump a bunch of garbage into the land and then just bury
toxic chemicals on stolen Navajo lands.
This landfill recognizes the first peoples to inherit this land, and they're sort of role as guardians and stewards of it.
Yeah,
which was terminated by us dumping a bunch of chemical waste into it.
Yeah, you know what's really funny about it before we go on about ESG is how much of the ESG rating is stuff that all of the people who are like this, the various, the Twitter blue tick people or the or Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever, who's like ESG is a Marxist plot from Davos to blah blah blah, is how much of your ESG score is actually just like, yes, your chief executive is at a sufficient remove from your board of governors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how much like very very corporate inside baseball people who should not be exposed to it know about. Like, genuinely, I saw some like anti-LGBT chads talking about DEI, and it's like, why do you know what DEI is?
Well, that's the thing. They don't actually know what it is. They know the acronym.
Yeah.
Just like with ESG, the story of it is this will be a thing that realigns the incentives of the capitalist with society in general. But, right, and actually what's in it is something that's very, very dry and very technical, but it occupies this place in the right-wing imaginary. It's bizarre. Anyway, no, I'm afraid it is not an ESG landfill, but that's a great idea, and I will be taking it. Alice, valid fill.
All right, I'm just thinking, I'm in mind of like parking validation here. So, oh god, if you park illegally or inconsiderately, a sewage truck comes along and fills, like, it sticks the sewage thing into the vents of your car and just fills it with like shit.
That's justice.
Yeah, exactly. It's street justice.
It's street justice.
It's street justice.
It's just below street justice.
I mean, this is it's wishful thinking, right? This is a startup that I would invest in, and that I would be happy to see made real. I want to see a cop car that is parked across like 3 disabled parking spaces, a bike lane, and a bus lane at once somehow. The NYPD stretch Hummer.
Hell yes.
What, for going to police prom?
Yeah, I would love to go to police prom. No, if I could see that like filled up by like a septic truck, that would, I think, make my life.
Or like one of the garbage men in New York that gets like the epaulets in the medal.
Yeah. They got to give you a special like medal for that.
I'm a garbage man operator.
Yeah, and that's what valid fill is. Valid fill will fill your vehicle with shit and piss.
I'm afraid, again, another good idea. It's not that.
Fuck.
I'm gonna ask
what
you
were
all
the
a question.
odds?
God.
What if you could place self-serve beverage dispensers in locations you never considered before?
That's an incredible sentence. First of all, okay, places I've never how broadly are we drawing this? Could I put a self-serve beverage dispenser on like one of the moons of Venus? Are we?
That's only limited by, I suppose, how much thrust you can generate.
we put a diving bell together. We're dropping a self-serve beverage machine onto the wreck of the Titanic. It's gonna like take out the fucking bell or something.
Just like a really misguided person who wants to help. Like, I bet those Titan people, they've been stuck down there for a while. They're probably hungry. They're thirsty.
I like saw the first piece of news that said they were trapped and they hadn't heard anything. Stopped seeing the news after that, so I assume they're still down there.
Yeah.
You know,
and I need to empower them. Excuse me.
Yeah, we need to empower the one person in that sub who is the kind of person who gets like a hot chocolate from a coffee machine.
Is this an American company? Sorry to interrupt.
It is, yes.
Yeah, because I can't think of anything more American than like American cities getting sweet treat dispensers on every corner before public bathrooms.
Well, see, that's also the thing. It's promising to me self-serve beverage dispensers in places I'd never considered, but I can consider self-serve beverage dispensers in a lot of places. And like, if the answer is just more stores, I'm going to be pretty furious because I want places I've genuinely never considered.
Yeah.
I want to see one like teetering on the top of the Washington Monument.
Yeah, this is...
Riley, where is this company located at?
I'll tell. Well, while I look for that on the site, I'm going to give you the next hypothetical, which is: what if you could empower prepaid coffee customers with an express line?
I love to go to. It's in Bradenton, Florida.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, I was about to say that sounds like an incredible Florida invention.
Yeah. So wait, I have like TSA pre-check to get a coffee from the coffee machine. Is what you're telling me?
That is right. Yes.
I hate when I have to go through like airport security to get my little hot chocolate.
Well, what if you could offer new levels of premium service for guests, or develop new offers you never thought possible?
Why is this worded like a sort of a coffee machine cult?
Well, I like the idea actually that you brought up earlier, which is one of these paradoxes about the nature of God.
Uh-huh.
Like, could God create a rock so heavy he himself could not lift
Yeah,
it?
could-
Could you imagine a new coffee machine related offer in a place that you could not possibly have imagined hitherto?
Yeah, you sort of break your own mind on this sort of Lovecraftianly. I genuinely, I'm all in on this. I love the Heaven's Gate Café team.
Yeah, we have placed a self-serve coffee machine like on top of K2, and what it offers you is eternal wisdom.
We've done a sort of like City in the City thing where the coffee machine is technically placed on your street, but it's like placed in a way that's like beyond seeing, and you have to like go around it from another direction in order to sort of like perceive it.
Well, here's another question for you. What if you could deliver new profit platforms with refill vessels? What then? What then would you do?
Fuck, I don't know. I've never thought about this before.
This proposal's amazing. I've never thought of any of this.
I just want this. I want this selfishly because, famously Mormons don't drink coffee. So I need,
Yeah, of course.
I need a self-serve coffee dispenser on like every square inch of Temple Square, right by the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like really shoving it in your face.
Yes, absolutely. We are pushing the coffee agenda on the Gentiles.
Yeah, that is something. I mean, honestly, that's something that like, yeah, that's a place you'd never considered putting a coffee machine before. Is in
the Holy of Holies.
Yeah, I need it on Captain Moroni's trumpet on top of the Salt Lake City temple.
Yeah, we developed an offer you never thought possible, which is like constant grinding temptation.
It just
God
makes you
works
not
in
want it
mysterious
more.
ways.
Thank you, Valid Phil. I actually had never imagined putting a coffee machine there or that offer related to a coffee machine.
Somehow we relate it to the book of Job.
Yeah.
See, like most people just go across the street from Temple Square to the church's multi-billion-dollar shopping mall and just go to Starbucks there.
Right.
But, that's more fun to just be right outside like the visitor center.
This is the thing. I thought in my mind about someone doing like why don't you do like equal opportunity offensiveness? Why don't you say, what if you put a coffee machine in the Kaaba? And I'm like, that's fucking hysterical. I would absolutely be on board.
Yes.
I think that's the funniest thing you could possibly do. There's like 3 Five Guys like within at like 10 meters of the Kaaba already. It's fine that you can't desecrate it any more than it already has been.
Like as soon as we get like as MBS just approves some drone delivery company, you're gonna be able to get like Deliveroo to the Kaaba.
Fully, yeah.
So here's another question for you. What if you had real-time data available in the performance of every beverage refill offer at any location?
I would consider this to be, I would do like Bush era leftism and be like, this is like the Patriot Act to me. The government or anyone else should not know how many times I order a little hot chocolate.
All right. I think I probably need to tell you now what Valid Phil actually is. And this was sent in to me because friend and coworker of the show, Tom, sent in to me an experience of going to Oppenheimer, where now at the cinema in London, one of the cinemas is using Valid Fill technology, and it's an RFID chip embedded in a cup that makes sure that you don't get free refills.
Oh, that sucks so
Great.
bad, dude. After all that, after you promised me a hot beverage self-serve machine somewhere that no human mind could comprehend it, the answer is you can't cheat the refills anymore.
Yeah. I remember when you used to make a suicide by putting all of the different flavors in, right? No more. We are finally going to end... we're finally going to end people getting too crazy with the Coca-Cola freestyle machine. Not that free of style, I think we'll find.
Coca-Cola limited
So we're just
style.
going back to the thesis of the show too. What if your soda can could just call the cops?
Yeah, genuinely.
This is like the final stage of Reaganism, I feel. Like this is we've gone from, welfare queens to now no refills on your sodas whatsoever.
Yeah. So, for example, the example they give is at Binghamton University in the States. Go
Binghamton fighting Binghams.
Bearcats. Yeah, the Binghamton fighting Bearcats. You too can support the Bearcats. So you have to buy the electric coffee mug. This is such a season 1 startup. I love it.
Oh yeah.
Buy the electric mug. and then you buy you like put your money on your mug and you buy a package for your mug.
Oh, this sucks so fucking bad, dude.
What?
So you can get a 2-drink recharge for $2.29, a 5-drink recharge for $4.99, or unlimited refills for $24.99 a semester, as opposed to what you used to have, which was just a cup.
The thing about going to university, particularly in the United States, right, is it's very cheap. So the universities, which don't have big endowments, right, they're really quite strapped for cash. They have to do this. They have to sort of like nickel and dime you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can't be getting free.
I mean, that's money that you're robbing from the Fighting Bingham's like programs. You know,
we need that new stadium for the Fighting Binghams.
Yeah, that's right.
So, for example, like, the example they give is. A university, like issue, hey, welcome to Binghamton University. Go Binghams. Here's your cup.
It's Fighting B. You have to say the whole thing every time.
Go Fighting Binghams. And then here's your cup, and then that's your one, and then you have to put money on your account.
This is my cup. There are many like it, but this one is mine.
So they say, what does this offer my business?
Without my cup, I am useless.
Without me. Private Pile, you will salute the Fighting Binghams. He's sitting in the bathroom at night. The music is playing. He's rocking back and forth, and he's just like, 3 ounces of Coca-Cola, 2 ounces of Sprite, topped up with iced tea, and then fill with orange Fanta.
Yeah, they find an orange Fanta in his locker and make everybody do push-ups while he swigs the 64-ouncer.
He swigs a 64-ouncer with no RFID chip at all.
Sir, it's an orange Fanta, sir!
I didn't know they filled butt glasses of shit that high. I've had Kubrick on the brain recently.
Oh my god!
Yeah, because you were doing the Kubrick stare at Spitting Image. Yeah,
we went to go see the Spitting Image. Spoiler alert for an episode that's going to come out probably at some point in the next few weeks. We went to go see the Spitting Image musical.
Yeah, subscribe to the Patreon now. It's bad.
I just Kubrick stared the whole time. Yeah.
Full Metal soda cup.
It's a good episode title candidate. Full Metal Soda, perfect.
Yeah.
So here are some of the other things they offer, right? So campus retail. They say campus retail operators can now leverage prepaid fountain as an engine to boost retail profits.
God, man. Do we have to monetize everything?
Yes.
Yes, we do, especially at the college. Like, as if like the college bookstore wasn't like the most like exploitative thing on campus to begin with. Like, good hell.
Well, it's now they're just getting constant gambling advertisements, and now they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, you can subscribe to Coca-Cola. When campus operators deliver a network of controlled dispensers, they create an opportunity to offer the proven good all semester vessel. So you buy a cup that lets you drink. It's basically like sorting people. Like in Elysium, like the grand aristocrats with their good all semester cups.
Well, this is the thing. Like, whenever we've tried to like tokenize this stuff in fiction, it's always been like, oh, you have a little wristband, or you have a little like jewel embedded in the back of your hand, or you have like a custom colored jumpsuit that says like, oh, you're on clearance code Periwinkle, so you're allowed up here. And it turns out it's just the cup that you get your coffee in.
Yeah, it's a keep cup, basically. So not only does this offer have a very high price per serving, it offers convenience value to consumers and is the engine by which successful operators increase their margins.
If you try and like put any other liquid in the good all semester cup, it gets sent immediately to campus police.
Yeah, no, it just bursts into flames.
Yeah, they like
somehow.
deploy the SWAT team, you know.
Like, this sounds like something that Philip K. Dick would have like pitched to his editors and got sent back because it was like too far-fetched. Like, come on,
like
we need to be at least rooted in some sort of reality here, Philip. Can you take it down just like a few notches?
And if people get upset about this or anything like that, they're just going to point to like, well, we had to do this because people have been pirating books because we were selling them at like an outrageous amount to begin with anyway. So now you get to have some kid on work study just upsell you on Coca-Cola as you buy like a t-shirt and 2 books.
I mean, if this is RFID or the thing has a QR code on the bottom, that doesn't sound very secure, which opens up the possibility of legitimately Coke freestyle machine hacking.
Yes.
I hate that these are the cybersecurity challenges of our new age. Guy getting free refills with like a QR code that fucking uploads something to the machine.
I really want to. I really would love if like to get another cyberpunk novel that really engages with how fucking stupid it all ended up being.
Well, all I can recommend in the meantime is Boys Weekend by Matthew Lubchansky, which covers a lot of the same ground.
Boys Weekend. That sounds like a book I can buy.
You can buy it at almost any good bookstore.
So I'm gonna, before we move on to the sort of the Utah chat, I want to say the last little thing about Valid Phil. This is from their About Us page, which is really fun. Valid Phil uses the magic of RFID technology. That's an old tech. That's not very new.
No, and not very secure. Like I'm saying, you could get a little flipper zero and just be like, okay, the machine is now gonna like puke orange Fanta until someone comes and tries to turn it off.
I mean, I for one love a whimsical startup.
I do. I do too. This is like very season one for us. This is old school.
It's a lot of fun. So it uses the magic of RFID technology placed on drinkware to deliver a new level of intelligence and business opportunity. Through its patented solution, Valid Fill makes it possible to control your dispensed beverage business and customize a viable prepaid refill program. Valid Fill, and this is my favorite part of it, their tagline, dispensing wisdom.
Fuck me.
So,
running.
just a peek behind the curtain. I've spent a large part of my career as a marketing copywriter, and just writing bullshit and getting checks. And I've worked for a few local startups, and I kind of have like I don't know if you call it a fetish, more of like a fascination with just shitty marketing copy, and that's about as good as I've ever listened to, I've ever heard. Dispensing wisdom for an RFID is just chef's kiss.
It really, when I saw it and I knew it had to be in.
Yeah.
They have two partners. Whirly Drinkworks, our strategic drinkware partner.
Excuse me?
Whirly Drinkworks, our strategic drinkware partner.
That's what like I would call a bar after I've suffered a huge injury to the language center of my brain.
Trying to describe making a cocktail. It's a Whirly Drinkworks.
The revolving bar, the Whirly Drinkworks. Yeah.
That's what like Willy Wonka would call it, like Coca-Cola if he bought it. It's like, it's no longer Coke. It's now Whirly Drinkworks, everybody.
Drinkworks.
And then their other partner is the Coca-Cola Company.
Oh, that's a big partner.
God damn it.
Hell yes.
You don't really need a second partner once your other partner is Coke.
That's right. Anyway, that's all for the larking about with the startups.
A chilling portent of things to come.
Let's talk about Utah.
The Beehive State.
Let's dispense some wisdom.
Yeah, let's dispense a little bit of wisdom. Let's talk about Silicon Slopes. And what fascinates me most, I think, about the Silicon Slopes phenomenon is how, with everywhere else, there is some feature of the government or just real estate prices, right? Like Texas made itself very attractive to like the libertarian capitalists that run, I don't know, big tech companies, but saying we're not going to charge you any tax, and California is super woke. Other places like in West Virginia, they're like, real estate here is basically free. You can't go wrong. But with Utah, what is so interesting is it is the presence of the Mormon church, or it seems to be the presence of the Mormon church, the network of the Mormon society, and the facts of Mormon life have in fact made it a very attractive place for these people to start, scale, or set up big tech companies in the way that we talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect sort of start to like a weird grind mindset industry that's just kind of taken over almost the entire economy of the state at this point.
I'll also add that I think there are also certain things that you talked about with Texas and West Virginia, like appealing to like the non-woke libertarian, as well as just having super cheap real estate. If you rewind the tape back to Utah 10, 15 years ago, when all of this was kind of like really in its infancy, that was also a huge part of the appeal, was like you could live, like Utah's cost of living was dirt cheap in comparison to like the East Coast or California or other places, as well as Utah is one of the most deregulated states in the nation. And then on top of it, Utah, because of the Mormon church, is incredibly insular, and you have a built-in network. So it's kind of this like just best of both worlds scenario for outsiders as well as like appealing to other Mormons. So it's kind of this like, I guess, perfect blend of libertarian tech startup world.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the ideal population
Yes.
for a libertarian tech CEO to like move somewhere is it's a lot of white people who fall for multi-level marketing scams all the time.
Yes.
And also like it's also like one of the reasons why Utah has invested so much in tech in the last 20 years or so is that the old industries that used to be big inside Utah are showing signs of stress. I mean, the top three, I think, before tech started becoming big was tourism, mineral extraction, and also multi-level marketing. So the big three, tourism is going to be a problem because all of our national parks in southern Utah might not be hospitable in about 10 years.
It was 120 degrees in Zion National Park this weekend.
That's legitimately one of my favorite places on earth. I got to go back before it gets too hot.
Go in
there.
November.
Yeah.
We need a soda dispensing machine there.
Yeah, we've dumped a soda machine into the Narrows. It's just like floating, like face down, like a corpse.
Good luck.
That's what you get at the summit of Angel's Landing. You make one of the most difficult hikes in the nation, and you can get a nice sweet treat at the top.
So I want to rewind a little bit, right? We talk about these original industries in Utah, sort of resource extraction, tourism, multi-level marketing, and the history of Utah, I think, also is worth going into a bit as a place that has consistently negotiated itself into a favorable position among more powerful neighbors and peers. Right? This is
American Switzerland.
Yeah, this is. Precisely, right? This is a
lot of white people with a lot of guns who like falling for multi-level marketing scams. Two places I've been that seemed very similar to me.
Can we get some healthcare, please?
How are the trains? You know, do those run on time?
Somewhat. I mean, we are a pretty decent Union Pacific hub, and also we have somewhat of a light rail system.
Yeah, see, American Switzerland.
Not the best, but it's there.
Hey, unlike anywhere else in America, it's not the best, but it is there. But this is the history of the Mormon Church in Utah, in particular, as a kind of quasi theocracy inside the states, consistently like coming into conflict sometimes with the sort of growing power of the United States, and while at the same time negotiating its own beliefs to be like, okay, the Civil Rights Act happened. Black people are now fully human.
Listen, God said that to the president of the church some 15 years after that happened. And
yeah.
That was...
Yes. God answered the call that black people were human 2 years after my parents graduated from high school. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and
he had been like leaving it on red this whole time.
it's like, oh shit, I typed it before I got to send it.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay, so there is this constant negotiation, which means to me it's not surprising that Utah, as the sort of the old industries of the states die, especially in the 90s, that it very quietly is not publicizing it as much as, say, California or laterally Florida or Texas, begins generating companies that are tech companies that are initially serving the Mormon Church, like Ancestry.com, and then end up creating a lot of other companies that are, again, quietly humming away in the backgrounds of lots of other businesses like Qualtrics, for example.
Well, it says that tech is sort of like another one of these powers with which you have to negotiate now. That's not news, but I think about the movie Bardo a lot, which is about sort of Mexico and how one of the things that the Mexican government does in that movie is sell Baja California to Amazon, because that's like a rational decision that you can make 10 years in the future. And yeah, it is the same idea, more or less, right?
Yeah. I mean, going through the history of like Utah in general too, like they've been pretty early adapters and have been very malleable to new trends or anything like that. And also when it comes to the structure of the government and also the structure of culture in there, like, for example, when the gold rush was hit in California and all that, Utah didn't get involved in that too much, but they were more than happy to sell the picks and the axes and the pans to the people going over there to kind of start like a boom there. Same thing with like mineral rights in the early 1900s. I mean, when you did that sort of thing too, like you also kind of adopted more of like capitalistic approaches, especially when it came to like copper bosses and silver bosses and kind of orienting the church's culture more towards a more capitalistic approach than the kind of growing socialist and like labor movement you had in Utah at the time too. I mean, there's a reason why that Utah is the state where Joe Hill got executed in. And it's just been kind of a system that generally it finds what's kind of where the trends are going and jumps into it and essentially does really well.
What do you credit what is distinctive about it where they are able to hop? I have my own theories, right? But what is your theory as to how the structure and nature of Utah and the church allows them to do that?
I think personally, it's the centralized structure of everything, along with a very sort of, it is a hardworking state. There are a ton of people who are willing to like break their back for labor and anything like that too. And the mixture of both like a centralized system that can kind of generally push trends along with a workforce that's willing to go along with it can lead to some pretty interesting trends.
Yeah. So my crackpot theory about this as well is just that unlike anywhere else in the States, what you have is a kind of hierarchy that is believed in fully by most people, but sits entirely outside the market. Right? It is full of these non-commodified, non-alienated relations. So long as you tick all the identity boxes, right? So long as you're white, you're man, you're straight, all that stuff, and that they are, and as part of that, you are actually able to rely on on having that sort of thick society that's been kind of.
Well, we broke that everywhere else. That's why we had to destroy the mob. Well, because that was Italians' Mormonism.
It's the Mormon mafia is a real thing, guys. I promise.
Yeah.
It's the one place where you're not. It's one place in America where they're still not bowling alone, as it were.
One of the recurring themes on our pod when we talk, because we focus a lot on Utah and culture and politics, is the insularity and just how homogenous Utah is. Like if you're living in certain communities in Utah, you can go weeks without seeing a single person who doesn't look like you. You go weeks not interacting with a whole group of people who look like you, who think like you, who attend the same church. And with that, there are rules inside of that community, one of which is the pioneer spirit that is pretty pervasive throughout the Mormon culture, which is all about, nose to the grindstone and working hard and being obedient and being diligent is the closest thing on earth that you can get to God. And when you put that into a professional context, you get amazing results because you get people who have just from birth been drilled down, this is the way that you're supposed to be. You're subservient. You say yes. You get all your work done. You work past hours, and there's a real glorification to that.
Yeah, and to speak to something that Riley said too, yes, it is kind of like a relationship that's outside the market, and I think at a certain point, the church started taking more steps to be more exploitative about that as well. For example, tithing is a good one too. 10% of your income goes to the church and everything like that too. And then all of a sudden these general funds where the tithing goes into starts moving more and more towards actual for-profit projects that the church runs as well. For example, I can't remember the name of the investment firm that the church runs, but they were finding that there was a lot of money that was kind of intertwined within the same pool that was going into this investment firm the church runs.
Ensign Peak.
So Ensign Peak, there you go. So at a certain point, it is outside the market, but it's having some mission creep towards the market.
And I would add that, on the whole exploitative point that Jordan made, the church, as it's been revealed, has up to, $150 billion endowment. And it's a church that's run almost completely on free labor. Like there's the quorum of the 70, like there's the top of the top who get paid, but everybody else from like bishops on down don't get paid for any of their positions despite spending hours upon hours every week doing that. I remember like one of like the great joys, one of the great privileges of when I was young was going and like setting up the chairs before church and cleaning the church before service and like all of that, again, completely non-paid.
Well, and that goes back to this idea that like one of the reasons it is attractive is it creates these perfect it creates a perfect subject for capital to exploit as a manager,
100%.
basically. And because and that's one of the reasons why like BYU, the FBI, the CIA, fucking every big company goes there because they're like, these people are enculturated to be, as you say, obedient and diligent. We have
find me a doctrinaire Mormon who fails a background check.
Yes, exactly.
And that's one of the reasons I'll come back to this, why this was interesting to me, because it is an cultural ideological reason for a kind of nascent, but again, like often highly, like, as usual, cynical and exploitative technology sector that's built on like the last bit of America that hasn't, or much of the like developed world that hasn't had everything eroded out of it because it was able to respond like that. But I wanted to go a little into the history, right? It's the 1990s when everything changes. Can you talk a little bit about like what happened there and how it's gone on to like how it has gone on to affect things?
Well, I think you have a few moments in the 90s that start changing a whole lot. Like you have Novell and WordPerfect start up in the hills of Utah County, which is where Silicon Slopes currently is. And that's kind of the precursor to much of the tech sector there. And you start having this growth of outside of that too, like Ancestry.com starts up there too, and I think around 2001. And then you start having more and more of a infrastructure built that can actually maintain a lot of these tech companies. Most notably, a national security agency data center, which takes up pretty much a good chunk of the military bases right next to Silicon Slopes, which creates a lot of the abilities for like cooling towers and for power requirements that are needed to run massive data centers, not just for the NSA, but also for like Adobe or for
Meta's
say,
opening
Qualtrics
one sort of in Utah pretty soon, I think, too.
Yes, they are. They got massive tax breaks from the state to do that as well, which is funny because we're right in the middle of the state trying to regulate social media to a weird extent with minors. So,
well, they can, the posts can happen elsewhere and then the data just gets handled,
Exactly.
This actually
I mean, it's true of the NSA too. Like what national security threats are there to Utah, but all of the stuff that, might threaten U.S. interests gets handled, or the data gets handled in part through Utah. So
one of the other things I think you sort of alluded to just now is how this creates a kind of conflict almost, because basically Utah and the church have sort of seen, okay, we can negotiate our future by now adapting to the sort of ongoing tech boom for the last 30 years. We've got these homegrown companies like Qualtrics and WordPerfect or Insight Sales or whatever. But then that creates a sort of a clash in demands, right? Because as we've talked about a lot on this show before, quite a bit of corporate progressivism, as you might call it, is, again, it's obviously cynical. It's obviously based on a business need, which is if we're going to be everywhere, if we're going to be able to potentially grow infinitely, we need to be able to work with, employ, or do business with literally anybody, which means that we have to then try and use the almost like diversity as a kind of wheel greaser for that kind of thing. And as you say, like this difficulty with wanting to, on the one hand, get Meta in, and on the other hand, wanting to have an extremely sort of draconian and strict social media regulation policy. Like, how are they gonna? What happens sort of when those two incentives come into opposition?
Well, we already have one answer to that, which is you become California. Like that's how California became the way that it is culturally. In part, is a story of like that influence being exercised. And Texas is trying to do the anti-woke version of that, and I guess Utah is trying to thread the needle between the two, or
essentially, yeah. I think what it mainly is that you'll have the tech sectors make a lot of noise about issues that are important to like the progressive issues, like for example LGBTQ rights and that too, where like you'll have the PACs that represent like Silicon Slopes and Utah Tech Lead and Utah Tech PAC. Like they'll go and try and lobby like legislators like, hey, please don't put in this trans athlete ban because this is stupid. It makes us look bad to the world.
Yeah.
And then they won't listen to them. And actually like last week, like Cloudflare's CEO, Matthew Prince, actually pretty much has had a quote on this one too that talked about this. And he says, quote, "I think Utah has some real challenges. It's a place that I love, but also it is a place that still has the highest LGBT teen suicide rates in the country and has an incredible challenge around some still very misogynistic practices and can be a very exclusionary place." But they're also not going to take their businesses out of there.
No, it's sort of, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned like DEI we talked about earlier. You mentioned it as a kind of a wheel greaser, right? And it's along these same lines. It's like there's this tension in terms of like who is legible and who is useful to capital in that way, where on the one hand you have this sort of like huge body of Mormons who are often very, very useful to capital, but on the other hand, if you as a tech firm, if you want to employ a trans person, for instance, or even if you want to employ someone who has like a trans family member and you want to move them to Utah, that's a difficulty and there's a tension there. And I don't know if you do resolve that or if it's just, something that they're content to like let simmer.
Yeah, I think there's the example I think is really perfect is in this situation is last year the Utah legislature came out with like a full trans ban, like puberty blockers, trans folks can't compete in high school athletics, just like the whole nine. And Ryan Smith, the CEO of Qualtrics, who's also the owner of the Utah Jazz, partnered up with Tim Cook from Apple and did this big stand against the legislature, saying like, this is intolerable. We can't do this. This is inhumane. Which good on them. Great, I love it. But
sure, I don't love the
silver lining is the reason they did that is because the Utah Jazz and Salt Lake City were slated to host the All-Star game that next February. And, the year before, Charlotte, North Carolina passed the bathroom ban and lost the All-Star game.
It's bad for business.
Yeah, it's really, really bad for business. So, like, obviously, Utah hosts the All-Star game. Spencer Cox, our governor, vetoes the bill, and then the Utah legislature plays the long game, and they bring up that same bill and make it even worse and even stricter in this last session, and it passes. Without the blink of an eye. And there is, now that the All-Star game has passed and everybody's made their millions of dollars, the tech CEOs don't bat an eye and don't really say anything at all.
What a great example of allyship.
Exactly.
What a perfect short con.
Yeah, it's just like it really is just that perfect example of like when it's convenient, they'll step up. Like ultimately the only thing that they'll advocate for is their own profits.
Yeah.
I've called it a few times political kayfabe because everyone is kind of in on the bit too. It's
100%.
like, well, we can't say that we're against it, but also the same point too, like we're not going to give up our tax breaks and also our sandbox intuitive programs that the state of Utah has given us too. They pretty much hand wave a lot of like labor and corporate laws on that are levied against us. And like, I think like a good example of this too is also like Love Loud, for example, like Tim Cook and what's his name? Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons put on like a music festival every single year that's pretty much focused around like supporting LGBTQ people. But also at the same point too, like they're not leaving the state. Like Apple's not going to shutter its stores in like City Creek Mall or anything like that. Like they're still more than willing to do business here, but it's just like we just have to make it very loud that we're against it.
It's also the case that like you can kind of have it both ways for as long as this situation persists, where either people can work remotely for one thing, but if you're someone like Apple, it doesn't matter. Like if you have someone who you want to employ who they cannot work in Utah, you can find somewhere for them in California,
Sure,
or anywhere else that you have an office, which is everywhere. So it's just this thing where you just absorb it, and it's so grim.
and even more so with tech being such a boom here in Utah, it's really the thing that's bolstering the economy right now. And if you can't employ a trans person, well, there are 17 other resumes that you can go through from, just local, white people from Utah.
Mormon Q Mormonson, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're.
I didn't have a stereotypical Mormon name on deck. I'm sorry.
I mean, ultimately, what I'm saying
Smith.
is it is not hard to fill jobs in the tech sector in Utah.
Yeah.
And while it might not be the most diverse, you're still getting butts in seats.
Mm-hmm. And so this comes back to this uneasy negotiation that happens where this group of Mormons in Utah, the Mormon Church in Utah in general, are able to, as they always have, maintain exactly as much, the exact balance between trying to make sure they're staying ahead of the next thing while keeping as much of that hierarchy that they sort of so value as intact as possible.
Hey, listen, if they lose this one, then in 20 years' time, God is going to say that it's okay to be trans.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's what happened a few times. God came down and said, no more polygamy. We're done with that. And then it was,
you lose a culture war, you go into the temple, you go into the Holy of Holies, you get yourself a coffee from the coffee machine in there, and you have a sit down and you have a think, and you come out and you're like, okay, God said that we have to stop doing this.
There was the perfect example of that just a couple of years ago, where the Mormon Church came out and said, if you have a gay family member, you have to denounce them. They're not allowed. It was it was a real hard line in the sand, and there was obviously it made international headlines, and there was all sorts of backlash. And then there was a string of LGBTQ Mormons who committed suicide, a large number, just this awful, awful backlash. And then the church just comes out and was like, oh, whoopsie doodle, you don't have to do that anymore. God works in mysterious ways.
And then, so you can wonder, right? There are a couple more things I want to touch on here as well. You can wonder. We've sort of seen how much the tech bubble was driven by the era of cheap everything and free money, right? As that has now come to an end, the question, I suppose, is how is the Mormon Church going to navigate something like Bidenomics, right? Are we going to see manufacturing come back? Are we going to see more action against labor unions? I mean, such as there are any, right? How does that work when we have that big paradigm change?
Well, I think what it is then you can see what happened after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank too, because almost every Utah tech firm was banking with them as well, including the biggest bank in Utah, Zions Bank, who was a fairly big shareholder in SVB, who lost 40% of its stock right after its collapse. So
fun.
Which is always fun. Yeah, you love a good bank run that could cause a regional crisis. But you also saw the state of Utah preparing to intervene to make sure that all these companies would still be whole. So I think at a certain point, a lot of these institutions inside the state are going to play the long game when it comes to tech as well, and maybe shore up any sort of losses that may happen in the short term, because they think in the long term it's going to be okay. Because after interest rates started getting cranked up in Utah, you saw pretty much every company just shedding 20-25% of its workforce, overnight.
We're going to bring back polygamy to deal with the problem of people being unemployed.
We have to make sure everyone in the community is taken care of, so we marry them.
The all polygamy chip fab is, that's the future. Everyone works in that.
That's weird. You should sort of come to the all polygamy chip fab from two different directions politically.
Everyone's married to each other. No one's in a union.
Yeah.
Well, it's the difference is it's one's the polycule chip fab and one's the polygamy chip fab. Only one has people wearing cat ears, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, the real horseshoe theory is polygamy.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's because you just wonder, they're going to see the writing on the wall, and as they have always done, they're going to just keep pivoting But every time that pivot happens, it just so happens to benefit all the people. Shockingly, it tends to benefit the people at the top and the church's investment fund and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Mitt Romney was one of the biggest proponents for bailing out SVB to pretty much just to ensure that the state economy didn't collapse. And he's also the same person who famously wrote that op-ed in the New York Times that said, let Detroit go bankrupt. But it's a little bit different when it's your own constituency. And also Bain Capital had a fair amount of share in SVB as well. So he had his own personal interests as well. But beyond that, like, it's a lot of the people that support the state that also go into the same people that support the Romneys and the Lees and all the prominent families that were the prominent ones that settled the state in the first place.
And was one more thing I want to talk about on the Utah subject, which is and this is sort of written about extensively in an article that you sent me called How Mormons Built the Next Silicon Valley While No One Was Looking, which talks about the specific importance of the fact that every Mormon is taught how to be a huckster for 2 years in her early 20s.
We teach the world how to whitewash a fence.
So can you go into that a little bit, right? Like how that works and how it's sort of selling belief in a religion is quite a bit like selling belief that my, little, doohickey is going to alter prepaid beverage forever.
So missions are an interesting thing because it's one of those voluntary, but also kind of mandatory things that people in the church have to do. Since me and Greg aren't by any stretch active members anymore, it does not matter for us. Neither of us did it because we wanted to do other things in our 20s. But for the most part, 18-year-olds and I think 19-year-old females, so 18-year-old males, 19-year-old females are mandated to do either a 24-month mission for going anywhere, and females have to do an 18th month mission. And essentially the entire time is you are based on metrics. How many people did you meet? How many contacts did you meet? How many reference cards did you get? How many people did you go tracked on? How many people did you convert? How many people did you give first, second, or third discussions with, or something like that? It's a very metric driven sales process.
It's Google Analytics for salvation.
You see some weird shit like that with like alternate means of reaching people. You see like Mormon TikTok or missionary TikTok and stuff like that. And it's like, this is very, very adaptable,
Oh, absolutely. And it's very hierarchical too, because you have like these missions that are geographically based under like one mission president who has district leaders and then zone leaders, and then down to your individual missionary who is the one that's making contact with people. But it's those district and zone leaders that keep track of the metrics for every single missionary who's going out and converting people and giving discussions and meeting people and all that.
For sure.
So it's, like I said, it's a very sales-based thing. So of course, like once they're done with that mission, they have this sales mentality, except for instead of for the Lord, it's for Vivint going door to door selling security systems.
What's really funny is that one thing I've noticed is that they've been able to proselytize a great deal outside showings of the Book of Mormon, which is just a fantastic example of how satire just collapses in the face of like persistence,
Yeah. The church actually bought an ad in the playbill for the Book of Mormon in its first run.
I mean, that's another example of just like the world's most adaptable organization.
Yeah. Also, I'm fascinated because I want to get inside the mind of someone who laughs at the joke about, and I believe that, the Garden of Eden is in upstate New York or whatever. It's in Mississippi, I think. Missouri, excuse me. The Garden of Eden is in Missouri. Golden Plate's on a hill in New York, all of this. And then goes outside, talks to a missionary time.
Talks to a 19-year-old.
Talks to a 19-year-old girl.
Who has never looked at a beer.
And is like, sign me the fuck up. I'm in,
Well, for a while, Mormonism was the fastest growing religion in the UK, which I found very surprising.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's
almost as if we have a lot of people who are despairing about everything and need the kind of comfort that religion can offer them.
Because in fact, I did used to think it was like, well, it's insane that a religion based on having friendly conversations with strangers and not drinking would take off here. But
but think about this, right? You're the most alienated you've ever been in your life, and someone who looks like they've never been unhappy in their life and has never even looked at a beer, like expresses an interest in you and talks to you. It's possibly the first person who's done so in like years.
Well, I guess it's this thing of it goes back to what I was talking about the decommodified relations, because what you've just described, right, with the mission control, basically, is that is a completely decommodified sales organization. That is these institutions getting built and then adhered to and then beloved by people. But it's ultimately, right, it's what that gets signed up to is a deeply hierarchical, quite arguably exploitative version of non-alienation, where you trade away so much of yourself.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that I think that a mission and why it transfers so well to, a sales position at Vivint or Qualtrics or wherever, bullshit tech company they end up at is, it's a pretty easy trial ground, especially like what you're ultimately selling is you're selling a community. You're selling a belonging, for a lot of people, say if they're living in like a third world country, there's a whole welfare system that the church oversees, so you can get help paying your bills and putting food on the table, as well as like you're selling the answers to the big questions. You're selling salvation, you're selling who are we? Where did we come from? What's happening to us, after death? And ultimately, for a lot of people, that's pretty enticing. I know what's going to happen to me after death. I get to go to church every week, and I have this built-in community who's very supportive and very loving, and it just, for a lot of people, it can help elevate their lives in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, like it's hard to say no if you're at your lowest you've possibly been in your life, and then you have a 19-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid from Provo just love bombing you.
Yeah, and then like on the missionary side of things, you're able to spend 2 years cultivating those skills that are then completely transferable to the tech and corporate world when you go into sales.
As a way of tying things up a little bit, I want to go back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, which is what they essentially offer and how they talk about it, how they offer these answers, they offer community answers, sort of this whole comprehensive package. And you got to remember, that's how all the big technology companies talked about themselves, especially in the period between 2012 and 2020. Like, minus the after death bit, they didn't so much address that.
Apart from in WeWork. Yeah. WeWork they did.
If you just replaced God with WeWork, basically, it's the same sales pitch.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, all of these things, whether it is the various tech companies, either inside or outside Utah, and the relationship between those companies and the Utah government is quite distinctive, right? They're all ultimately talking about the same thing, which is nothing is working. You are alienated. Here is a set of answers, whether that's in a pitch deck or whether that's in like a missionary conversation. It's kind of much of a muchness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you're completely right too. It does swap it out too. And I think also just like why missionaries make good salesmen too, is that you've had them in 24 months of the most adverse conditions you could possibly have as a salesperson, because you have them pretty much living off of the charity of others, top ramen, and having to live with another person 24/7, no matter what. Like at a certain point, if you can handle that, you can probably handle having a ton of phones slammed on you and having doors slammed in your face.
Imagine a 2-year sales boot camp with a bunch of people you've never met that you have to like pretend that you're like, that you love. Not just you have to pretend that you love them and that they are part of your family.
Yeah, and so I guess we can see how this just fits into that whole long history of producing people who are just crazy enough to stay one step ahead of capitalism. And when I say people, I mean a people, not the individual people, of course. Anyway, I think that's probably a pretty good place to land. Greg, Jordan, Brigham Young Money, thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. It was a gigantic pleasure.
May God bless us
all.
Ours.
Yeah, that's right. Heavenly Father. And also, I want to thank you, the listener, for listening to the show. Don't forget, there is a Patreon. $5 a month, you get a second episode. $10 a month, there are a few more episodes. At some point soon, you will hear a review of Spitting Image if you are a Patreon subscriber.
That's true. It was a terrible time in
Make
our
it
lives.
worth our while to have done that,
Please do. So subscribe to Brigham Young Money. Subscribe to us.
Yeah.
The theme song is Here We Go by Ginseng.
And we have our we have our live show in London tomorrow. The link will be in the description. And we will have, if you're in Scotland, our tickets are on sale for our Edinburgh show on August 4th. Those will also be in the description as well. So once again, Brigham Young Money, boys, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. And we'll see you on the premium episode in a couple of days. Bye.
Bye.